I have done very deep journeys on ketamine where it's a very powerful substance, and I'm like turning into like blocks and like a white and silver colorless like world, and it's just things are kind of like throbbing to music, and I am music, and I'm dissociated where I have no idea what Shawn is, what Earth is, what reality is. And to like leave existence, leave identity, and then rebuild it like as it slowly kind of comes back in. It's a very, like, you have to like have, when you go that deep into these experiences, I would definitely recommend that you have some work that's been done, that you have experience, that you have safety, that you have people around you that are there to take care of you, that you have someone to talk through with this after, you know, all these kinds of things.
Welcome to Modern Enlightenment, a sanctuary for your soul, where we'll go on a path of personal and spiritual development. I'm Austin Mao.
And I'm Juju Wang. We are your companions on this journey of self-discovery and spiritual connection.
Join us as we delve into the fusion of modern psychotherapy, neuroscience, psychospirituality, and shamanic plant sacrament ceremonies, exploring the transformative potential of psychedelics for the mind, body, and spirit.
Our mission is to guide you to a place of profound awareness where emotions can be felt.
Together, let's illuminate the way to a brighter, more enlightened existence.
Modern Enlightenment, where your journey to inner peace begins.
Okay, I'm so excited to be joined by my friend Shawn Wells here on the Modern Enlightenment podcast. He's an ingredientologist, a formulator, a biochemist, and an all-around great hugger. So, welcome.
Thank you for
Good
having
to see you again.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. You know, the path of getting to know you has been a really interesting one for me, because at some point in the course of running our retreats with psilocybin and with ayahuasca, I did some research around biohacking and how to find a supplement stack that can be supportive in brain health and the recovery process, right? In the night after ceremony, the day after, et cetera. A friend of mine sent me a 60+ page PowerPoint presentation. And it was like, this is the one you got to look at, right? And this was before AI, and I had a virtual assistant comb through it and create that supplement stack, which we've been using for the past almost 2 years now. And lo and behold, at Mind Valley University last year, we met, and I was like, "You're that guy. You're the guy that authored this giant like PDF PowerPoint that we hand to guests that's for their brain health." And that was how our relationship got started. And then I got to find out that there's so much more dimensionality to you, like not just an incredible scientist, but also just a really caring person. I remember seeing you go on stage in flowy robe, and I was like, yeah, this is the guy that's really living that intersection of science and spirituality. So I would just love to start by like maybe hearing your story of how you became this ingredientologist and developing out these protocols for working with plant medicine.
Yeah, I grew up in a very difficult home, a difficult childhood. Brothers ran away, and I fought depression and suicidal thoughts. I was bullied quite a bit growing up, and became morbidly obese to deal with all the stress, which was just kind of a downward spiral. And I ended up going to college and working out, reading all the muscle magazines. And there was a book called Optimum Sports Nutrition by Dr. Michael Colgan that like athletes were using amino acid cocktails and getting really cool results. And I read, of course, like Arnold's book on bodybuilding and all this, just all the muscle mags. And at that time, creatine had just dropped. And, so I was doing creatine and protein and BCAAs and all these things. Ended up getting in incredible shape. and going to my medical doctor in between my sophomore and junior year when I was studying business at Babson College. And I told him all about my passion for working out and supplements. I grew up, my mom actually loved supplements. She sold Shaklee like in the 70s, which is like these whole food supplements. And so I always believed in the power of supplements. But after like getting these incredible results, I'm like, I was just waxing poetic to my doctor and thinking he was going to just, as a medical doctor, just say, well, this is 25 years ago. He's going to say all these things are stupid, whatever. No, he ends up listening to me, seeing my transformation. And this is crazy. Like he took out a piece of paper. He drew out my lifeline from 20 to 80, I think it was. And then he showed it to me and he said, why not be happy between here and here? And I was like, what? And he like saw how passionate I was. And I didn't have Instagram. I didn't have Tony Robbins. I didn't have Oprah. I didn't have like any of these things like people have now that's like, go chase your dreams. Everything I had heard was be real. Go do the things that make money. Stop screwing around. And so to hear this from a medical doctor who at the time was like the pinnacle for me, because again, I didn't have Logan Paul and all these other people out there that are, Grant Cardone or whoever. So this man telling me this like literally gave me permission to go pursue my passion, and it changed my entire life path. I ended up finishing my degree at Babson, but then, going back to school and studying, getting all my prereqs out of the way, then getting into my dream school, Chapel Hill, studying nutrition, biochemistry, exercise, sports science, becoming a dietitian, and then a chief clinical dietitian for about a decade. All the while I was studying, to be in supplements. Like my dream was to be in the supplement world. And so I was like on message boards like bodybuilding.com, all these anti-aging boards. I would end up like working at the Arnold and the Olympia at these booths, like helping these companies out. I would write their scientific pieces. Then I started formulating. Then I started making my way into the supplement world. And I ended up having a big opportunity to work for Dymatize, which is a massive supplement company here in Dallas. And I ended up getting hired as a VP of R&D. And that was the start of everything. And I formulated hundreds of supplements there. We sold the company in 3 years. And then every supplement company came after me because I helped sell a supplement company. And I got this moniker in the industry as the world's greatest formulator because I was like creating new ingredients. I was formulating all these supplements. I started getting out into media, speaking on supplements, and stuff just grew and grew and grew to now where I've formulated over 1,000 supplements, patented over 30 ingredients, helped sell 11 companies. I have a best-selling book called The Energy Formula. It's wild. But what was beautiful is along the way, I found my ikigai, my purpose, my reason for being. And I'm so blessed that, thinking about where I came from, I didn't even get into I had brain tumors. I had Epstein-Barr, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, Hashimoto's. I was in several car accidents. I've had 2 discs put in my neck. I've had hip surgeries, knee surgeries, shoulder surgeries, like all kinds of stuff done. And I'm on the other side of, most of this. Like you're never like completely past everything, but I'm on the other side of most of it. And the beauty of that is I get to serve others in what I do. And like, that's where I feel so, so blessed. And like what helped lift me out of my depression was not only supplementation and nutrition, but also living a purpose and helping others. The more I gave, the less I was concerned about my own drama or my own problems. And that was a beautiful thing. And then, going into COVID, like, was my first journey at New Year's 2020. And that shifted everything for me. That was a massive, massive change. At the time, I still was battling some depression and even suicidal thoughts because of I ended up getting to a point where I was working 80 to 100 hours a week, and I wasn't even sure why. And the biohacking, unfortunately, was a way for me to press harder. I became an expert at how to push harder and sleep less. Instead of now we're looking at human optimization, like the feminine and the masculine aspects of it, right? Like where, yes, there's the masculine that's like the PRP, the V cells, the exosomes, the peptides, and all these things. But then there's also now the feminine of self-care, of journaling, of dance, of meditation, of grounding, of forest bathing, sun gazing, like all these kinds of things that we see as much as of importance, if not more important, than all these kind of cutting edge ideas. So it's really the marriage of the two. And yeah, my first journey shifted everything for me. Like, again, I was kind of in this grinding mode of overwork and ultra masculine energy and imposter syndrome and trying to prove myself all the time. Always giving my resume when I walked into rooms. I was in these masterminds trying to level up so hard. I was trying to get on Joe Rogan because I was on Ben Greenfield and all these other podcasts. Nothing was ever good enough. And I just wanted to keep leveling up. And then I did this journey, and all these people that didn't know me, that were very famous people, interestingly, like at this event I happened to be at. And I felt very intimidated because it was almost all like celebrity people in my circles. Very famous biohackers, authors, wellness people. And I was sitting there in a cuddle puddle, and all these people were just holding space for me because I took 5.5 grams my first experience. And I was like, what? Why? Like, why are these people here? Like, I didn't show them what my value is. Like, I didn't prove to them what my value. Why would they hold space for me? And the whole night, I'm like, what is this about? Like, and then I finally realized that I can have love and be loved. And for me, that was a massive breakthrough. And that was the shift in like self-care and self-love that took all that biohacking knowledge and turned it into like the foundation that is great to have, like all that, understanding wellness and nutrition, supplementation, but also like to add to it, like the understanding that I can have love and be loved. Like that was the game changer. Like up until that point, you could have told me that and I would have said, yeah, of course. It's just I would have logicked my way through it. The first time I anchored that in my heart, for me, I remember staring at the ceiling for hours when everyone was asleep and just being like, that's the most profound awakening inside me to realize that. And ease came into my life after that. Like I lost that imposter syndrome. I lost that grind, like hustle. There's always hustle, but hustle and grind, like that Gary Vee thing, you don't need that. Like hustle is the reason you hustle is to hustle and flow. Like I want to get to a flow state. I want to be in my genius. And it's like all this stuff clicked finally when I had my first journey. And so that's where everything shifted. And then I started bringing in the biochemistry and the nutrition into the journey space. And that's where, you got to know some of the things that I started working on.
Wow, it sounds like the very beginning of this path towards mastery in the craft of formulating and health and wellness began as healing almost a wound, right? Like the bullying, the obesity, maybe the internal part around self-value. And then you got so good at it, but then it was killing you. You were taking your own medicine, but it was just to activate and energize your type A-ness towards, enhancing your resume and seeking that external value. And then all the way through, finally, there's this like plant medicine experience that solidifies it all together, like why it's all happening for you. And it's to actually let go of the need for something outside of you. It's to find something inside of you. This is the story that I created listening to you.
Perfect. It's a great interpretation. It really is that. Like, up until that point, I think I was serving so much that I is at the cost of my own joy, and I was serving from the empty cup, as they say, and there was very little self-love there, and it became like the badge that I would wear is that, how much could I do? How much could I serve? And that was like, I was trying to earn accolades, earn value, not have that imposter syndrome, have people say, wow, look at how incredible he is, how much he gives, how hard he works, like how much knowledge he has. And meanwhile, there was no joy in it. Like, I had lost that along the way. Like, whatever I had found in purpose, I was kind of like losing through this desire to keep leveling up. And there's no point that it ends. Like, every time I got on a bigger stage, every time I had a bigger supplement or a new ingredient or a new accomplishment, a new podcast, it was always like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And it was exhausting. It was absolutely exhausting. I was killing myself. If I didn't kill myself intentionally, I was killing myself indirectly. And so that's like the moment that the big pivot came in about, I can just be happy. Like, I can just be. My whole life was revolved around doing. And the idea of the human being was like groundbreaking to me. That I could just have the ease of just simply being, and people might actually like me for who I am, not what I do.
I was just spending some time with a friend, Paul Austin, who's the founder of Third Wave.
Yeah.
And he was sharing that we do this consciousness work so that we can hold greater and greater levels of complexity in our lives, right? Something that I'm with you is that you were able to hold a lot of complexity in sort of the scientific realm, but then you had this experience that really showed you something very simple in a sense, right? It's like self-love. Maybe I can summarize it that way.
Yeah.
But what I'm so curious about is, I think about like Einstein being almost a walking paradox, right? This is a man of science, but also deeply spiritual, right?
Yeah.
I think he said something to the extent of like, God doesn't play dice with the universe, right? And here you are, a medicine man, right? Full of just volumes of knowledge in biochemistry. And yet here is something really simple. Like, it's just, at the end of the day, about love and service, right? And how do you like bridge that complexity and that simple in your life now? Like, where has the last 4 years taken you, and how's this path holding these two dualities?
It's a wonderful question. And you actually, it's funny that you said what you said earlier, because I literally had the presentation that was the intersection of science and soul. And so that is what it's become for me. I've taken a lot of my scientific knowledge, and there is like a champion of skepticism that comes through, like, maybe like the Lee Nortons and the, Paul Saladinos, if you know them on Instagram, these guys that are just, everything is BS and everyone's trying to scam you. And it's, if it's not in a study, and then it's not real, all this kind of stuff. And we're taking away our intuition. We're taking away the deeper spirituality. And before I learned science, I had wonder in my life as a child, and I had spirituality, and I had awe, and I had unwavering belief in things, a knowing. And as much as science has given me, and as much as I, love science, it can also be weaponized, as we've seen over the last several years, where, trust the science, and, it's used as a tactic to intimidate and to control. And to your point about, Einstein, or there's been some other philosophical, scientific people that I love, like kind of like Stoicism and these ideas that are now like profoundly interweaving the two. I believe, God is the ultimate scientist, but also there's so much spirituality obviously there. I mean, he created the universe and created us, and the connection between us, and the connection between all these dimensions, and quantum. Like, we're just starting to understand the quantum, and it takes faith, right? Like, to me, there's just this powerful connection that I'm learning, as I'm learning to bring my childlike wonder and intuition in to this science background that I have. And as I start to weave the two together, like, my passion is just growing, because like a lot of what I do as far as these ingredients and concepts are so far out in front of like what's proven. I'm using a lot of intuition to discover things. And I get people that are around me all the time that say that won't work. There's no proof of that, whatever. But I have like a feeling. I have an understanding, I have an intuition. And it's why I keep discovering all these new ingredients and having all these breakthroughs, because of my intuition. If I waited for the proof, it'd be 20 years too late. And that's the case in science over and over and over again. There's things we know are a fact. Like, I remember I think it was in the mid-90s that we proved that steroids actually work in the Journal of American Medicine. And people knew for like 20 years prior that obviously steroids work. There's a lot of things that we just know work, and things that we know don't work. We just know it. And especially when there's the bio-individuality of all these things, right? Like, we need to know the intuition of what works for us, even if they're told about what works for everyone else. We can say, like, that's great for everyone else, that doesn't work for me. And that's really important in maintaining your sovereignty and not being told what you should be experiencing or what you should be doing to your body.
I think you're speaking to a paradigm that we're facing in the psychedelic field as a whole, right? It's like, what we know scientifically about how psychedelics works is a small, tiny fraction of what I think the actual potential is. Because what the experience that people can have and often do have in a psychedelic is often described as ineffable. It's like, which literally means indescribable in words, right? And there's this melding of science and spirituality that is happening, that is accelerating with not just psychedelics, but the growth and interest in mindfulness. COVID has, we have COVID to thank for some of this inwards looking into ourselves, right? And yet I also think there's a danger too here. Like, intuition is incredibly valuable. And how do we know, like, what works for, how do we know it's not snake oil? How does somebody know that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And that is like where I think at the core of all of this is your sovereignty. At the core of like every journey is your sovereignty. At the core of science is your sovereignty, like trusting yourself and maintaining your own power over your being and your actions, taking responsibility for your actions. Like that idea of, radical ownership, like complete ownership, extreme ownership, whatever, like that book, like owning whatever it is that is yours. That's very powerful. But as far as, some of these substances, I believe that they work on a number of levels, but some of the most important ways that they work, these psychedelics, these entheogens, is the suppression or dissolution of ego and turning off default mode network, and then the massive increase in neuroplasticity. When these two things happen, radical change can happen. And they just won't happen, especially if you are depressed, especially if you have trauma, especially if you have anxiety, because the brain is resistant to change, and it's turning down the ability to take in new information and emotion. So we're turning down neuroplasticity, and as a result, we stay in loops when we're depressed. We're also turning up default mode network and letting this kind of override take place where we're not very in control, and it's massive amounts of ego where everything is about, us, and we're not open to stepping outside of ourselves. And we're also turning down the amount of data that the brain is taking in. So colors are less sharp. We're hearing less things. We're feeling less because we're traumatized, and the body and the brain is saying, nope. We put up that wall. We've had enough. And then on top of that, you can stay essentially dissociated out of your body. And so you're just not taking in that much. You're not living. You can't be mindful. You can't be present. You can't be that emotional. And you can't put yourself in someone else's shoes and be that empathic. Your world has shrunk down to about nothing. And so that's where you're at. And that can be helpful short term to get through trauma. But our bodies and brains don't know when that trauma's ended because we're staying in that loop. And so to get into these spaces where we want to rewire a whole new brain, a whole new experience, and we're safe in the environment we're in, we can turn up neuroplasticity, we can turn down default mode network, we can turn up emotionality and empathy, and we can turn up our senses and take in all this information and completely rewire. And there's no other way to do it quite like this. And I can get into some really cool supplements and like anchors and ideas that I have, like this echo dosing that I think is pretty groundbreaking as well on top of
that. I love this. What I'm hearing is almost like a reflection of the body keeps the score, right?
Yes.
We're in this exciting time right now where there is an exploration of the mind, body, spirit integration. Like when I feel sick or unhealthy, I feel very little capacity to be at peak performance mentally and even spiritually, right? And there's this interrelationship between, there's a circular loop, right, between the body and the mental health and I think also the spiritual health. And where that draws me is the curiosity of like it sounds like your initial expertise has been very body focused, right? Like
yes,
the biochemistry of the body. And in the last 4 years, it seems like there's been a very intentional exploration of mental health and spiritual health. And I'd just love to hear, like, along the way in these past 4 years, especially, what has your journey been like? What have you learned is that interrelationship, and what are the tips that you can give people as an expert in that integration, like to support them in their own growth and their own well-being?
Well, I can tell you that even though my desire was to help and to love, I only had a limited capacity to do that on a fairly superficial level because I did not have that capacity for myself. And so I would end up reaching out and connecting with many, many people on a more superficial level. even though like I wanted love, I was a loving person, I just didn't have the tools to really have the depth. And so I ended up, either hurting people or pushing people away, really on a unintentional level, because I just didn't have the capacity to love myself. And there's a lot of truth to the idea that when you love yourself, the greater depths you have to love yourself, the more you can love someone else, and vice versa. Like, this plant medicine path led me through a conscious uncoupling. And then now I'm with an amazing partner that I've been with for a year and a half. And I'm constantly showing her the depths to which I love the real her, like the sides that she's scared to show. The wounded parts are the parts that I really want. Because I know, like in my heart of hearts, like the more I can love those wounded parts, love her completely, the more I'm holding space for myself to have those things. And everything's a reflection and a projection. And, those are some of the most valuable lessons that I've got out of this. Is the love we give is the love we receive, and vice versa. So, that was the thing too. I mean, there's people that would try and love me and give me those kind of deeper experiences, and I just did not have the capacity to believe it. Like, again, I was stuck in like, why would you do this? Like, what is it you want? Like, how am I going to end up getting screwed by this? Like, or, all the things that could go on in my wounded brain.
Yeah, I imagine that resonating with lots of our listeners. I guess there's this like basic question of, do I deserve to be loved?
Yeah.
Right.
1,000%. That's the question. That is the question I asked so many times. And when it becomes, this is the problem with just therapy, is I wear my trauma like a backpack, and it's my identity, and I'm holding it tight. And I'm asking that question all the time. Do I deserve to be loved? No, because like I won't be me anymore. Like, I'll lose my identity. Like, who will I be without this? I don't deserve it. Like, this is what I deserve, is to have a hard and difficult life. And this is what I was raised for. And all the, whatever the lies and kind of extrapolations and interpolations that we've added, and the stories and the constructs and religion and politics and family and all the things, all the pieces that we've created to construct our identity and our ego. And it's only like in these spaces, one of the medicines that I love for this would be ketamine, where I can dissociate enough and put myself outside of, this kind of trauma and anxiety, and see myself away from the backpack. And it's like I'm putting the backpack down on the other side of the room, and I can not have to wear it. And I can anchor what that's like to not have that backpack on. And that's really powerful, like where once you anchor that feeling and you know what it's like to not be wearing that, and you feel safe without it, that's a whole different experience. That's where like ketamine is really profound in some of these experiences where there's trauma that's taken place.
I'm really glad that you mentioned ketamine, because I've had this curiosity that I've wanted to ask you, and I get asked all the time, like the differences between the various psychedelics, right? And I have a story that that you are experimenting on yourself, right? Because there's this like, you were speaking about intuition, and there's this almost in this avant-garde field, a necessary condition that we are using these substances to explore consciousness before holding space for or recommending it to other people, right? I think the science is many, many, many years from catching up to the subjective experience of these ineffable uh, experiences. So, ketamine, federally legal 2019, dissociative. I've also used it many times therapeutically. I'm curious what your take is on, let's say, ketamine versus psilocybin.
Yeah, it's dissociative. What's interesting about dissociative, if we go all the way to one direction, it's been an anesthetic in the past, then like you can have like this dissociation where you like literally are outside of your body, outside of identity. There's like essentially ego death. I have done very deep journeys on ketamine where it's a very powerful substance, and I'm like turning into like blocks and like a white and silver colorless like world, and it's just things are kind of like throbbing to music, and I am music, and I'm dissociated to where I have no idea what Shawn is, what Earth is, what reality is, and to like leave existence, leave identity, and then rebuild it like as it slowly kind of comes back in. It's a very like, you have to like have, when you go that deep into these experiences, I would definitely recommend that you have some work that's been done, that you have experience, that you have safety, that you have people around you that are there to take care of you, that you have someone to talk through with this after, all these kinds of things. But it can be such a powerful experience for me, similar to like 5-MeO or just a straight DMT, where when I shoot outside of my body for whatever, 15 minutes, 60 minutes, I realize that we're creating this existence, one. Two, I've had this in 5-MeO every single time, that I was never born and I never die. That I'm just transmuting this energy. If you've watched The Egg, I would encourage anyone that is listening to this to go to YouTube, watch a 7-minute video called The Egg. It may challenge you in terms of religion, in terms of constructs, but it is very profound. I think you'll get a lot out of it. Whether you believe in it exactly or not is irrelevant. Super well done, a great story, 7 minutes. But those are the things that come through, and that like, I'm just connected to everything. That's another like epiphany that comes through every time I do this, that there's a connection to all of it. And I don't understand what it all means, because I don't know that we ever can or ever will, but it also tends to make the things that I'm overly focused on or stressing over seem very unimportant. Realize that I'm never born, I never die, I'm connected to everything, that I'm creating this experience, and I'm here for a reason. Like, are these things that we're stressing about things that are really that stressful? And that's a message that comes through. Like, there's just a level of ease that always comes through after these experiences. But ketamine can be very different at different levels. Like when I just do like an intranasal ketamine, there's a light amount of dissociation that actually helps me be more present. Like just a light dose of ketamine to me serves almost like the idea of alcohol, where it's mildly dissociative. I'm saying a light amount of alcohol, like a drink or two, where it can be that social lubricant where I feel like we can actually be more present, especially with a brain that's not trained for mindfulness, meditation, and presence. It can quiet the noise of the brain. So of that light amount of dissociation stops the kind of multitasking, the monkey mind, like the thinking about all the other things, where you need to be, who else is that, who just came in, why are they doing that? Like, instead, all I have is the ability to just be present in this conversation. So sometimes dissociation in a light level can actually help us be more present. That's what I've discovered. And then, of course, there's varying degrees of ketamine, like where you can have a journey, but not necessarily be that far gone out of your body. Where you're like, to me, the most profound experiences I've had on ketamine are when I'm in the quote unquote K-hole, like where I'm literally exercised, like I can't move, like I'm just gone, like out of my body completely. And those are very, very profound, especially with music, especially if you're very safe. Those are profound for me.
You've already spoken to so many, like such a spectrum of experience, right? Like the level of usage where it's a social lubricant and drew the analog to alcohol, all the way to the 5-MeO DMT experience where it is a complete dissolution of self and ego, right? Of a dissolution of time or experience of time, even that you never born, never died. And I'm curious, like, this is such a wide swath of experience. Like, what is valuable in this spectrum of experience? Like, where do you kind of draw the line on how deep to go?
It's like there's certain places that you can go that are like so comfortable, so loving, that can just turn up the color, turn up the sound, make you feel like connect on a deeper level, get in your cuddle puddles, bring that warmth and safety of like childhood in. Those are amazing. But also galactic, explore and go really deep and get into spaces that are quite uncomfortable. And that's where I really feel like deep resilience and breakthroughs are made, where you don't feel as connected to identity or constructs. In NLP, it's called level 2 thinking, like when you're attached to identity and constructs and religion and rule sets and whatever. And you can kind of throw rules out and just like recreate your existence. And where you have that resilience where, you don't see anyone as like being evil and this person is being good. You don't see like these the constructs of duality, like this idea of duality that's so simplified. Really in NLP, like there's the idea of like neuro-linguistic programming. Let's say if we all believe one thing, then there's no disagreement. And if we believe 3 or more things, then we're all going to talk through it. We won't be attached to anything, and it'll be a great discourse. But when there's only 2 choices, whatever choice you don't make, philosophically, fundamentally ends up becoming the wrong choice because you chose something. And if you chose it, your body, your brain wants it to be the right choice. Therefore, you reject the other choice. And why is it we're stuck between, Apple and Android and PlayStation and Xbox and Republican and Democrat and liberal and conservative and mask, no mask and guns, no guns and, abortion, no abortion. And why do you think that all these things end up being a yes or no, black or white? It's control. It's 100% control. And when I talk to anyone about masks, I get, I believe certain masks wear KN95 or N95, but, probably not with this, virus, but, it's probably, you need like the right, like seal on it. And, maybe these cloth masks probably are not ideal. Maybe they're actually making you more sick, giving you upper respiratory infections. Oh, that's interesting. Well, how do you feel about vaccines? Well, there's the mRNA and there's, the traditional vaccines. I think some of them could be good, but, it depends, like, maybe like certain populations, that are higher risk, it might make sense, but, probably with kids, it sounds super complex when we talk about it. that there's like hundreds of viewpoints on all these topics. Interesting. But when we're given a choice, what are we given? Yes or no? Which is it? Yes or no? And that's interesting. I mean, that's where in the plant medicine realm, we reject these things of yes or no. And we see there is no black and white. That we see that there's a million variations on gray. That profoundly changes your existence.
Yeah, it sounds like the capacity to hold duality, right? Or what might be embodied in the word oneness, like the elimination of the facade of separateness between us all, which comes from beliefs. And this, a friend of mine, and I think yours too, Jamie Wheel, shared with me a philosophy that people should be guided only to the extent that they have the capacity to integrate what they experienced or what they saw. And some of the experiences that you're sharing are so profoundly deep, like to completely lose sense of self, lose sense of time, lose sense of individuality, right? How do you integrate something like that into your daily life? Because after doing plant medicine, wherever you're going to do it, it could be somewhere like here or in the jungle or something, you got to come back to your 9 to 5, come back to your family, come back to your relationships. Like, what would you suggest is that process? And I'm also curious to hear, like, from a supplement standpoint too, or a physical standpoint also. Like,
yeah, that's a great point. All those are great points. There is an abrasiveness that I have learned that it's hard from a
totally
expansive experience, and being like in this kind of delicate and raw space emotionally, nervous system wise, and then just trying to like plug yourself back into quote unquote reality or the matrix, that can be jarring, very intense. And
yes.
I have definitely learned that if I'm taking these experiences seriously and to be profound and to be important as they are, that I'm going to have a facilitator, that I'm going to treat these things with reverence, that I'm going to give myself the space before and after to allow my nervous system to recalibrate, to allow my body and brain and soul to recalibrate, and not just thrust myself back into traffic or get on a plane or, whatever, and have it be so jarring where, I'm just not being kind to myself. I'm just not allowing myself to process. When you're going through something like that, that's why, my facilitators, Tom and Cole, we would do, MDA, sassafras, then we do ceremonial cacao and psilocybin. The next day, we would do a full day of Wachuma, San Pedro, with potentially like midday, we would have 1 gram of psilocybin. And then the next day we would, get into our circle and really kind of talk through the whole experience as a collective. And to me, that extra day on Wachuma, which is so grounding, loving, speaking of bending, time, there's this body clock, this master clock called the suprachiasmatic nucleus that all your cells kind of run on this clock. And it's kind of like your circadian rhythm, but it's also how time. And I believe that Wachuma somehow overrides that, because I could watch a sunset, for 2 minutes and it feels like hours. I could have a 2-minute conversation and it feels like hours, or I have no idea, or I could do something for hours and it feels like minutes. I don't know what time is, and I'm just hyper present. My nervous system is very grounded. And it's so good to process what happened during that journey to, on psilocybin. So that's been, a nice one for me, is to not have that jarring effect and allow myself a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Let's say that Friday night was the psilocybin experience, to have, the entire time to really process and lay around and, lay by the pool, lay on some cushions and blankets and, just chill. Like, that we don't even allow that for ourselves most times. So, just allow that time, allowing yourself to journal, to take a walk, and just sit in nature. Those are all just beautiful things.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I used to live at the beach in Los Angeles, and I would hardly go to the beach, and just it sounds to me like part of the integration process that you're advocating for is just space,
Yeah.
creating the space that we don't typically give ourselves. And yet that's one of the most challenging things that I've experienced participants coming through our container having, right? They're already carving out precious, vacation days for a 5-day, 3, 5, or 7-day experience with us. And then it's like, oh, I'm going to go home and just do 100 emails and a ton of Zoom meetings. But that space is so necessary. It's so necessary, partially because even at a biochemical level, there's that neuroplastic window, right? Of like what I've read is 2 weeks to really remap our neurons.
Yes, and there are ways to enhance that.
Give them to me. Tell me the ways.
So, some of the supplements that are in the stack, maybe we can even, kind of make that available, with this podcast. We could have that.
Oh, absolutely.
That whole presentation available. But there are some ingredients that enhance neuroplasticity, like 7,8-dihydroxyflavone, or its metabolite for DMA, dimethylamino 7,8-dihydroxyflavone. These are going to keep neuroplasticity high, which is BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, NGF, nerve growth factor, and mTOR, which is, it's mammalian, like raptor. It's a whole pathway of protein synthesis. So, which we tend to think of for skeletal muscle, which is really important. mTOR is super important for skeletal muscle, but also we're discovering more and more how much importance it plays in the brain. And so all of these things are relevant, with BDNF, NGF, mTOR, upregulating those so that we can have that heightened neuroplasticity, because we talked about that's the rewiring of the neurons, the brain cells. And like once you, when they fire together, they wire together is kind of the traditional thought. So like disconnecting these and allowing for a whole new path, as it's talked about, like you just keep skiing down the same ski tracks, right? This is throwing the powder over the trail and allowing us to find a whole new path to blaze down the mountain. Mm-hmm. And so what's important here that I've done with this idea of echo dosing. So this is something I've actually trademarked, is when you are in these spaces, and for example, I gave you that I have sassafras with MDA. I have ceremonial cacao with, let's say, peanut envy or whatever your, psilocybin is, golden teacher, whatever. And then the next day I have wachuma. So what I'm going to do is have that facilitator that facilitated my journey take microdoses of all of those things that I had during my experience, put them together. Now I'm not just microdosing mushrooms. I'm microdosing the mushroom. I'm microdosing the traditional ceremonial cacao. I'm microdosing that MDA. I'm microdosing that wachuma. And it's prepared by that facilitator. And I'm going to certainly take it, let's say, when we do a weekly phone call, Zoom call, when we're on maybe with other people that were in that container with me. And then if I had the experience, like the playlist, right? Like our senses are very powerful. And that playlist, we all know, can be powerful from the journey. But that song, when you had your epiphany and there was like a fold coming into your brain at that exact moment with your epiphany, your serendipitous epiphany, there's a new fold in your brain. There's new neuroplastic thoughts and we're thinking in a whole new way. That song is anchored to that. And if, we're around someone, a facilitator that can spray, agua de Florida or, spray whatever, lavender, sage or whatever it is that we're, smelling, we can go back to that, right? So my idea is that we not only microdose the exact plant medicine journey, but then we know that exact song that was taking place that we want to anchor back to. We know that exact scent. We can, in piece of clothing, we can anchor these things again. Maybe like in NLP, chain anchors by pressing the webbing between your thumb and index finger. That can be an anchor. So if you're having an experience, a glorious experience, press that spot so that the next time you can trigger that, you can bring it back up. So then the thought is all these supplements that I have in my stack or post to help with neuroplasticity, to help with the neurological kind of the nervous system getting into more of a parasympathetic state and staying there. And especially when you're trying to have these experiences where you're trying to pull those anchors back up. I have that whole supplement protocol, but another thing I'm doing, part of the echo dosing, is that I'm microdosing those things that I'm macrodosing during my journey. So now I'm microdosing what I macrodosed post-journey, my plant medicine, and I'm microdosing what I'm macrodosing, the supplements, during the journey. So if that makes sense, I'm kind of, it's a whole flip-flop. So it's helping the body to have its knowing and pull in these psychosomatic anchors, which makes all of this way more powerful. Neuroplasticity is going to go up 1000%.
Totally. Yeah.
When you're doing, so it's not just where I have to always use plant medicine to get into these spaces.
I love what you're sharing, and it's something that is actually, I didn't even know that you had this as part of your protocol. It's something that we do here as well. We have people microdose before the journey, which I think creates a relationship with the sacrament and the experience to build up safety in the system, right?
Yeah.
Especially for the vast majority of people that come through our container that have never used a psychedelic. And then after the journey, continuing a microdosing protocol with facilitation, right? And when I hear your share, I hear elements of the biochemistry of your body still continuing to use these substances. Yep. I also hear the ritual, right? The ritual of, you mentioned Agua de Florida or ceremonial music that was critical, at critical junctures. And it seems like there is this synergy between, once again, the body and the mental and spiritual experience, opening up more gateways and pathways for durable change. That seems like that's what you're relating.
Yeah, and just the idea of we seek ease, but too much ease makes us weak. The idea of allostatic capacity and allostatic load is our stress bucket, how much stress we can take on. And then there's the idea of hormesis, where that stress creates a stronger, more resilient, more anti-fragile human being. And the same is true in these plant medicine experiences, where I think it's important at first to be super safe, to be super loved, so that you can lean in and learn that, right? We're infants.
Totally.
But as you start adulting in the plant medicine space, then you can be way out there, as long as there's a tether, as long as there's like that lifeline, right? Like we're like the astronaut, or we're the deep sea diver, and you've got that long way behind you. And you know, it's somewhere back there, and you just trust. But that allows you to go into whole new spaces of very uncomfortable spaces, where the music can be uncomfortable, where the tribal chants can be uncomfortable, where your nausea can be uncomfortable, where your dissociation is uncomfortable, where someone next to you is screaming and crying, and that's uncomfortable, where you're having diarrhea, and that's uncomfortable. And it allows you to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And now you have a whole new level of ease, and that is resilience, and that is strength.
Right. Building the capacity to hold more complexity in life so that we can meet life's discomfort and uncertainties with a greater ease, right?
Exactly.
Well, this has been a really incredible exploration. I really appreciated how we began, and in many ways, your professional career began with biochemical and the scientific outlook that was so intimately tied with your own personal journey around self-value. And then as you started exploring consciousness with the support of plant medicine, it seems like there was this ping pong of like, okay, now spirituality, love, like the simplicity of the exploration of the beyond, right?
Yeah.
And it almost feels like it's coming full circle now, where there's a molding of the two halves of your life, you could say, even though it's only been 4 years, just like the men of science, as well as the spiritual being that you know yourself to be. So just really appreciating that synergy and thread through your own personal story.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation, and you seem to summarize the things that I say very well. So I think you've heard these things in different ways and from different people, and can synthesize these things well as a facilitator. So it's been wonderful holding space with you.
Awesome. So Shawn, just to cap off for our listeners, if people wanted to find more information about you, about what you provide, to just soak up your knowledge, what's the best way?
At Shawn Wells, ShawnWells on all the platforms. ShawnWells.com, again, ShawnWells. I have, free newsletters. All the information on my platforms is like I do talk about plant medicine. I talk about studies. I talk about nanoplastics and biohacking and red light and supplement stacks for depression or anxiety or performance. So all that good stuff. And lastly, energyformula.com is my book, and I have a course coming out soon on that as well. And the book is available on Audible, softcover, hardcover, and ebook as well. So if you just go to energyformula.com, you'll find all my supplement stacks and all the biohacks, all that good stuff.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your breadth of knowledge in such an accessible way. And we're going to for sure link the PDF, the PowerPoint that we use here at Ceremonia, authored by you, for the supplement stack that we give people post-journey and the days after. So thank you for that gift of all the guinea pigging you did on yourself and your beautiful intuition combined with your scientific mind.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Modern Enlightenment. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to check out our website, subscribe to our online community, and check out our social media links in the show notes for more resources and updates.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay connected with our upcoming episodes, where we continue to explore the intersection of modern science and spiritual wisdom. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep shining your light.